Hello, it's Mr. Gibbs here again with part 2 of this video, starting with question 11 from the exercise 1 introduction file. So in the previous video we went down to question 10, starting this time with question 11. What is the total number of widgets that's sold? Well, this is arguably the easiest Excel formula in the world that most people probably know already, and that is simply sum B5 to B104. While I'm here, let's talk about what Excel formulas and functions are. This is a function, it has a name, and these things here, after it, everything in the brackets, this is the arguments or the parameters that we pass to the function, and the key point here is that a function always returns a value. So I give something to the function and it gives me something back. So this is what I give to the function, the parameters, the numbers that I want to sum. Sum takes those numbers and gives me a number back, which in this case is 576.36 or 576.36, 57,636. Okay, so let's move on to number 12. It says each row is a single sales transaction. So each row, so each one of these is a single transaction. How many of those transactions, how many of these lines have more than 100 widgets? Well, the widgets, as we learned last time, these are in this second column here. And we need to go down and find out how many of these are over 100. Now, if I were to do that manually, I could start at the first one, 282 there, and say, is that more than 100? Yes, it is, so that's 1. The second one, is that more than 100? Yes, it is, so that's 2, and so on. And I keep going down the list, and every time it's more than 100, I would add 1 or count 1 more. So how do we do that with an Excel formula? Well, let's take a look at the answer that I have in E27, and the way we do this is to use the COUNTIF function. So we did count earlier on, and COUNTIF really just adds 1 every time there is a number which is over 100. So this COUNTIF function, it has 2 bits of criteria, or 2 arguments, or 2 parameters. First of all, this is the range. So this is the list where I find the numbers. And secondly, the criteria. I need to specify that I want only to count when the numbers are greater than 100. Now, with a COUNTIF function, one thing you just have to learn is that the criteria function is text, and text always goes inside these quotation marks, or inverted commas as they're called, and that applies to the COUNTIF function. Okay, so what do I need to know here? Well, first of all, I need to know this is my greater than symbol. If I wanted less than, I would change it to less than. If I want greater than or equal to, I'd have to do it like that. Okay, but for me, for this question, I need to find out how many transactions, how many numbers in this second column were greater than 100. And if I press enter or control enter, as we learned in the last video, we end up with 98. So 98 rows are greater than 100. And that's the COUNTIF function. Now, these functions don't live on their own. I could use this function together with another function or another number. I could add 5 to it if I needed to, or I could add another COUNTIF function to it and keep going and keep typing function after function. So don't think just because we're learning these functions on their own that they exist on their own. They can be used with other numbers and other functions as well. So let's move on to number 13. The question says, I'll zoom out so I can read it. If each widget costs €2.50, what's the total turnover based on this list? Format your answers as currency. So, as you can see, the answer there is already given for you. How do I find the answer? Well, first of all, I add up how many widgets were sold, and I multiply it by 2.5, which is my €2.50 unit price of a widget. So we know here that we had 57,636 widgets, and now we need to multiply that by 2.5 to get the total turnover. We end up with 144,090. The question also says format your answer as currency. Well, how do I format my answer as currency? Well, I tend to use shortcuts, and that's what I teach in the classes. There's a really great shortcut that you can use for formatting cells, and that is Control and 1, or in German Stroke 1. You'll hear me saying that in the class quite a lot. Stroke 1 or Control 1. If I press that, I end up with my Format Cells box, and from here on the left hand side I pick Currency. So these are all the different types of ways in which I can see my number. Let's go to question 14. 20% of the total turnover is payable in tax. So 20% of this number here is tax. What is 20% of the overall number? Format as a counting format. Okay, so I need to find 20% of this number. How do we do it? Well, in question 14, I simply take the number, which is E29, equals E29, and then multiply it by 20%. Now, 20% is a perfectly valid number in Excel. You can type it in that way and you get the answer, which is 28,818, or you could put in there 0.2. Don't forget, in English we use the dot, not the comma, for decimal places. So I could type that or 20%, and it gives me exactly the same answer. Let's move on to question 15. What is Mr. Nikielski's total turnover? Format this as currency. Well, Mr. Nikielski occurs or is seen in column A. He's a person. So I only need to find a turnover for Mr. Nikielski. So his turnover depends on the number of widgets that he sold. So every time there's a Nikielski, I need to add up the widgets and then multiply that by 2.5 or €2.50 per widget to find his total turnover. So how do we do that? Well, let's have a look at this one. I'll zoom in a little bit here so you can see this a little bit better. We have this time a sum if. So what does that mean? I want to sum or add together if. Well, first of all, I need to look in column A here at my range of names. That's my first parameter, and in there I must search for the word Nikielski. So that's my first criteria. So this is the place to look, and this is what I'm looking for. When I find the word Nikielski in column A, I then take the equivalent number from column B. Add all those up, that's what the sum if does. When that's finished, I multiply the total by 2.5. So for now, what I'll do, I'll just remove the 2.5 from there so you can see what the total number of widgets is for Nikielski. We end up with 17,275, and if I multiply that by 2.5, which is the price per widget, you'll see I end up with a number, or the answer, 43,187.50. Again, format that as currency. You can use the shortcut Control and 1 to do that, just like before. The other way to do that, one other way, is on a keyboard. If you can find the dollar symbol on a keyboard, you can format it that way. So I press Control, Shift, and number 4. So Control, Shift, 4 on a German keyboard gives me currency. Now my machine is actually set up here for US format, so that's why it's opted or changed to the default currency as dollars. But actually I want euro. Okay, currency format. You'll see that the format should be in euro. Doesn't really matter which euro you choose. Let's pick English and Ireland. Why not? So there we go. You can see the slight difference here between currency format. Now in the previous question here, which I didn't show you, but I'll talk about it now. This one is accounting format, and you can see in accounting format that the currency symbol is on the left of the cell, whereas the currency format here is beside the number. So accounting puts the currency symbol to the left of the cell, and in currency format here you'll see that the euro symbol is directly next to the number. So let's have a look at number 16. And what's that? Well, now we have to find the answer for Mr. Nikielski and Mr. Gibbs. So how do we do that? Well, just like in the previous example, I found Mr. Nikielski's turnover here. This time I need Gibbs and Nikielski combined. So we know this gives me Nikielski's number. So if I were to change the word Nikielski to Gibbs, that would give me Mr. Gibbs's number. That's the only thing that's different between Gibbs and Nikielski. Once I've done that, I can then add Gibbs to this number for Nikielski and I get the answer. Let's have a look at this formula together. So what have I got here? Well, first of all, I've got sum if, just as before, Nikielski's turnover, which is sum if A5 to A104 Nikielski, and take his numbers from B and multiply that by 2.5. I then add the same thing again, but this time in the second part of the formula you will see the word Gibbs. Now this word here, this whole formula here is the same as the first part. The only difference is this word here, which is Gibbs. That's the only thing that's different. In fact, what I will do is I'll just delete that formula in there, so it's blank. The whole cell is blank now. I will take this formula. Now this is a little trick which is always useful to learn. Let's select that formula. I'll copy it using my standard Windows copy paste. So let's take the whole thing, including the equals, Control C. That lets me copy. I'm going to press Escape on the keyboard. Click in cell E35. I'll edit the cell, so press F2. You see the cursor's flashing there. And then I use my standard Windows paste, which is Control and V. I get that same thing, okay? And then I plus, and I want the same thing again. Now if I Control V again, I end up with an equals here that I don't need, so remove that one. And change the word Nikielski for the second part of the formula to Gibbs. Now the key point here is that you spell the names correctly. Try not to misspell Mr. Nakielski and try not to misspell Mr. Gibbs, especially as they're your teachers. Right, if you press enter, you end up with the answer, which was 90,957. Let's take a look at question 17. What is the total turnover for everybody except Mr. Gibbs and Mr. Nakielski combined format as currency? Well, if we take a look down this list, there are some people that are not Gibbs or Nakielski. In fact, there are only two in the whole list that are not Gibbs and Nakielski, or Nakielski. We have Delamere, and we have this blank cell that I talked about in the previous video. So I need to add up and find the turnover for everybody that's not Gibbs and Nakielski. Neither Gibbs nor Nakielski. So let's have a look at the answer there. Back in cell E37. Let's take a look at the formula there. Well, the quick way to do this was to take the total turnover, which was that one, in E29, 144,090 that we found out earlier on, and minus the number we just found for Gibbs and Nakielski. That will give us the total turnover for everybody except those two, which is 53,132.50. If you see numbers on a sheet and you can reuse them, why not? Let's move on to question 18. How many transactions had a number of widgets higher than the widget mean in question 5? Well, let's go back to question 5, and we have here the formula average, which gives us the average number of widgets across all the sales. That was 576.36. So, how many of the transactions, how many of these numbers are higher than that number? Well, if I were to count it, I'd have to go through and say 1, 2, 3 and so on, but I can use my count if that we had before. Now, earlier on we saw count if, and it needs two parts, and you might remember that I told you that the criteria part of a count if is always text. It's exactly the same in this example. So what am I looking at? Well, I count if. Where am I going to count? Well, I'm going to start counting in the second column, looking for numbers and counting them only if they are greater than the average of those numbers. This one here is a slightly awkward formula because the criteria, the second part, must be text. Now, this greater than symbol must be in quotation marks, and this ampersand or and symbol, ampersand, connects this symbol to the average function. Okay, so we have a function inside another function here. I could just use the number. There's nothing wrong with changing this to the number which is above. I could put in here, if I just remove that, I could put 576.36. Okay, that gives me 51. However, if you want to include a function in your criteria, there's nothing wrong with connecting that to the other piece of text. Now, these ampersand symbols, this is called the concatenation operator. Now, it's a difficult word. Concatenation joins bits of text together. Now, this is a bit of text and this is something else, okay? It's another piece of text in this case. So I'm joining this together with the greater than symbol. So the answer to that question is 51. Let's look at question 19. Question 19. Exceptional transactions are those with the number of widgets is less than or equal to 100 or greater than or equal to 900. So what does that mean? Well, in this list here, the really high ones and the low ones are called exceptional transactions. The high ones or the low ones. The stuff in the middle are not exceptional, so they would be normal. So what is the total number of exceptional transactions? Really high or really low? Well, let's take a look at the formula. Well, this first part, it says count if B5, B104, so that's my second column, and I'm looking for numbers that are less than or equal to 100. As before, this stuff here is text, so it must go inside quotation marks. And that is a function which can exist on its own. That finds the ones that are less than or equal to 100, the plus symbol, then adds the number of transactions with the number of widgets is greater than or equal to 900. So these are the really high ones. So this part tells me the really low ones, and this part here tells me the high ones. I add them together and I come up with the number 16. That's it for this part of the video.